on the Feast of the Holy Family, we have these readings. The first reading talks about the care of elderly. The second reading talks about the relationships in the family. And the gospel account, of course, is the account of the family rescuing Jesus out of the death threat under Herod. And oftentimes this Sunday is used to glorify or develop the concept of family life. But actually it's almost the opposite meaning that the church has in today's feast. Today actually is a continuation of the Christmas proclamation, which is the idea of the incarnation, or God becoming a human being. One part of God's becoming a human being has to do with himself. That when God entered the world, he acquired a human body, a human psyche, and a human mind. And every person's mind, psyche, and body have pluses and minuses. As you get older, you notice more of the minuses in every one of them. But anyway, we have these three components that are part of what it is to be a human person. But the next level of incarnation has to do with being in two families. The first family is what we would call our immediate family, and the second is the country in which we live. And that also has its limits and its blessings. And if we were to look at the family in which Jesus arrived, both the immediate one and the country, we would look, I think you'd look first at all of the idea of what Jesus was going to do in his life. Ultimately, I think you know that Jesus was going to be an itinerant preacher. And he would have been much better to have been born, let's say, to one of the Pharisees in Jerusalem. They were scholars. But Jesus was actually born into the family of a carpenter, and that's what he was trained with. If you look historically, I think if I were to look around the world today and pick two countries I did not want to be born into, they would be Afghanistan and Iraq, because they're both occupied countries, which is the worst situation anyone can live in. And yet Jesus was born into an occupied country. The Romans occupied the country he was living in. He was also a member of a religion, the Jewish religion, where at that point all the leaders of the religion were actually appointed by the pagans. The Roman authorities insisted on appointing the leaders in the Jewish religion. And you can imagine that did not make for the holiest state of the religion, as we see in the scriptures. A plus on Jesus' side was that he wasn't living in Jerusalem where that was going on. He was actually living in Galilee and had less effect of that. But the accumulation of the whole thing is the idea that in every human life, first of all in our person, there are pluses and minuses. That's the nature of being a human being. In the families in which we live, there are pluses and there are minuses. And in the country in which we are living, there are pluses and minuses to that. And it's through everything through in human life. And it's something to remind ourselves that I think one of the problems today is too many people look at the minuses as excuses. The minuses are part of everyone's life. There is no one exempted from that. So the minuses are there as well as the pluses. And part of human life is learning to look at the pluses, build on the pluses, accent the pluses, and try and diminish the minuses as much as possible. But they're both there. God could have taken Jesus and had him an absolutely perfect human being, physically, mentally, emotionally. He could have had him an actually perfect human being in the family in which he entered, and a perfect human being in the country situation in which he was born. But I'll tell you a secret, if God had done that, he wouldn't be a